Story 1. Walking along the river, I saw a skinny girl emerge from a tattered tent. It was my 5-year-old granddaughter. "Mom and I live here," she said. I uncovered a shocking truth about my estranged daughter, and then, "This is our new home, Mommy and me." I was speechless at my granddaughter's words. After all, it was clearly just a shabby tent on the riverbank. However, my 5-year-old granddaughter seemed unaware of the gravity of the situation, perhaps finding the outdoor living novel. What on earth was going on? As I stood there confused, even more shocking facts came to light. This was absolutely unacceptable. Filled with anger, I vowed to seek revenge for my daughter and granddaughter. "Congratulations on your marriage." I hugged my daughter, Maggie. She looked so happy in her wedding dress. "Thank you," she replied. Maggie's husband was the second-generation president of a company, Ben. Her partner seemed well off, taking Maggie to fancy restaurants and giving her expensive gifts. Initially, I was overjoyed about my daughter's good match, raising both hands in celebration. All I wanted was for my daughter to be happy. "I'm glad you're happy for me," Maggie smiled gently, always thoughtful of her mother. Their wedding went smoothly, and all I could do was pray for their harmonious life together. Little did I know then what trials awaited my daughter. While I had hoped for Maggie's happiness, I discovered something terrible after she married Ben. He held outdated values, what you might call male chauvinism. After they got married and my granddaughter, Charlotte, was born, I went to visit Maggie in Ben's house. "Maggie, coffee." Ben not only ordered Maggie around while she was holding and soothing Charlotte, but he also tried to chat with me while leaving Maggie standing. "Ben, do you always treat Maggie like this?" I couldn't help but frown. "Isn't a wife supposed to devote herself to her husband? Is there a problem?" He replied, sipping the coffee Maggie had made, seemingly unconcerned. "I want you to treat my daughter with more care," I protested, but Ben wouldn't listen. Our thought processes were completely different. As I was leaving, I whispered to Maggie, "If anything happens, don't hesitate to talk to me." She nodded silently. Walking home, I squinted at the sunset. Come to think of it, my husband was kind of like that too. My late husband also had old-fashioned values and always spoke to me in a commanding tone. I sighed, wondering if husbands have always been like this. After that, I couldn't see my daughter or granddaughter for a while. When I tried to contact Maggie, she wouldn't answer the phone, and there were no return calls. I thought maybe Maggie was busy with childcare. As I continued to worry, one day I finally received a phone call. "Hello, Maggie. Have you been well? Is everything okay over there?" However, it wasn't my daughter on the other end of the line. "It's been a while, mother-in-law." "Ben, why are you calling from Maggie's phone?" "So it was you who's been persistently calling her phone." Ben threw sharp words at me with a sigh, not answering my question. "It's pointless to try contacting Maggie. She's mine now. Don't treat my daughter like an object. Put her on the phone." "Shut up. Don't contact us again." He spat out these words and hung up. As I listened to the dial tone, I was dumbfounded. At the same time, I couldn't stop worrying about Maggie, so I went to see my daughter when I knew Ben would be at work. However, Maggie came to the door with a gloomy face. "What are you doing here? Ben hates you and told me not to see you anymore." "I'm sorry, but I was worried about you." "Are you really okay living with Ben?" My daughter lowered her eyes sadly, and I felt helpless. "Hey, why don't you come back home with Charlotte?" However, she strongly pushed away my outstretched hand and glared at me. "Don't be ridiculous. Do you want to make Charlotte a fatherless child?" I was left speechless by Maggie's vehemence. "When you butt in, it causes trouble between Ben and me. Please just leave us alone." "But I'm just worried about you." "Mind your own business. I'm happy with my rich husband and cute daughter. I have nothing more to say to you, so go home." With that, Maggie slammed the door shut. I was so shocked that I couldn't move from in front of their house for a while. Maybe it's better if I don't interfere with them anymore for Maggie's happiness. After being so strongly rejected by my daughter, I felt helpless. I wiped away the tears that had unknowingly started flowing down my cheeks and trudged away. 5 years passed without me seeing my daughter. Although there wasn't a single day when I didn't think about Maggie and Charlotte, there was nothing I could do. I lived my life praying for their happiness from afar and taking care of my own health so as not to cause trouble for my daughter in the future. Then one morning during my daily walk, I decided, today I'll take the riverside route for a change. As I walked near the cool riverbank watching the morning sun, I encountered an unexpected sight. "What's that?" I noticed an unfamiliar tent pitched on the riverbank. Moreover, it was a shabby tent, dirty in places. When the entrance opened and a child about 5 years old poked her head out, I felt my heart almost stop. As the girl started washing her face in the river, I recognized her. As I cautiously approached, the girl noticed me and smiled brightly. Hello, are you Charlotte? Yes, I am. How do you know my name? I thought so. I'm your grandmother. The last time I saw Charlotte was right after she was born when I visited Maggie's house. The girl in front of me was the spitting image of Maggie when she was little. However, Charlotte's body was painfully thin and emaciated. What are you doing in a place like this? This is our new home, Mommy and me. Charlotte seemed surprisingly cheerful. Maybe she thought this unusual camping was exciting. Charlotte, is someone there? As she said this and opened the tent flap, it was Maggie who poked her head out. She froze when she saw my face. Mom, she whispered in a trembling voice, then hurriedly grabbed Charlotte's arm and ducked back into the tent. Maggie, so this is where you've been? What happened? It's none of your business, so go away. My daughter kept rejecting me with a strong tone. I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew this wasn't a normal situation. Don't worry. I'll help you. Everything will be all right. I promise. As I continued to speak gently, eventually I heard sobbing from inside the tent. Mom, help me. And so I took my daughter and granddaughter into my protection and brought them back to my house. I prepared a bath and meals for them, and after they had calmed down, I listened to the full story. What I heard shocked me. Ben had enforced male chauvinism at home, treating Maggie almost like a servant. Furthermore, Ben only saw Maggie as a tool for bearing children, and right after Maggie gave birth to Michael, who was to be the heir to his company, he kicked Maggie and Charlotte out of the house. I was speechless, not even knowing about the existence of my grandson. When Charlotte was born, he kept berating me for not being able to have a boy, but then when Michael was born, he said I was no longer needed. Maggie was stroking Charlotte's head as she tearfully recounted. And when they were kicked out of the house, they were threatened. If you tell your family or ask anyone for help, I'll hurt Michael. That's why they couldn't turn to for help and had no choice but to start living in a tent. Maggie had told me to go away to protect me. I absolutely cannot forgive this. After learning everything, I couldn't stop crying at the terribly cruel treatment my daughter had endured. It's okay now. I'll take care of everything. As I embraced Maggie and Charlotte, I planned my revenge against Ben. First, we thought about collecting evidence of Ben's wrongdoings. However, Maggie had almost nothing with her when she was kicked out of the house. She had left with just the clothes on her back, almost no money, and had been eating grass growing on the riverbank for meals. How did you get that tent? Actually, I secretly took it from the storage shed at Ben's house. Maggie looked apologetic, but it was understandable given the emergency situation. They had been camping out on the riverbank in that tent for about half a month. According to Maggie, her smartphone had been taken away and was probably still at Ben's house. I had recorded how I was usually treated on my smartphone, but now there's no way to access that evidence. He probably took it away anticipating that. I felt like grinding my teeth at Ben's cunning. The next thing I considered was whether we could take legal action. However, I realized it would be difficult to afford a lawyer. Besides, Ben was a company president with income. It was clear he would use his money to hire a top-notch lawyer. We wondered if there was any other way. After discussing, we decided on a certain method to corner Ben. Not even 3 days had passed when Ben came barging into our house in a rage. From early morning, there was a violent banging on the front door. Open up. This is your doing, isn't it? Thinking he might break down the door if this continued, I quietly let Ben into the entryway. However, inside I was doing a victory pose because this was the beginning of our counterattack. How may I help you? I acted submissively, pretending to be frightened. There's no use trying to play dumb. Maggie's here too, isn't she? You broke your promise to me. What are you talking about? Could you please explain in more detail? Ben seemed irritated by my act of trembling in fear. You took pictures of me splurging at a strip club and spread them on social media, didn't you? I don't know how you did it, but the company's account is in flames, and it's become a huge mess. My, that's terrible, but isn't that what they call reaping what you sow? While pretending to cower before the enraged Ben, I inwardly smirked as I said this. As Ben had said, it was indeed us who had orchestrated this. Ben's company was known for its low employee wages, yet he was out partying at strip clubs almost every night. Knowing this, I paid one of the women at the club he frequented to take photos of him there. Then I created an account and posted those photos, spreading them across social media. As a result, angry messages flooded Ben's company account. It seems that this caught the attention of people related to his workplace, causing problems for the company. Then the employees started complaining about my behavior on social media. Thanks to that, even our business partners have run away, and it's been terrible. It seems he had lost credibility, lost clients, and the company was on the verge of collapse. Maggie, you're here, aren't you? Come out. I warned you, but you went crying to this old hag. Ah, you mean how you threatened that if she told her family or asked anyone for help, you'd hurt Michael? I stopped my act, straightened my back, and confronted Ben. He seemed to sense something was different about me. That's not a warning, it's a threat, isn't it? Shut up. You stay out of this. Ben yelled and kicked a potted plant. However, the pot full of heavy soil didn't fall over, and instead he hurt his foot, grimacing in pain. Perhaps angered by this, he even tried to kick the shoe cabinet. You'd better not throw a tantrum. I'm warning you for your own good. Mind your own business. Just bring Maggie out. This time I'll lock her up so she can never leave the house again. I silently handed him a piece of paper. What's this? When Ben looked at the paper, he saw a restraining order written in large red letters. Stay away from my daughter. This is a warning. What? Don't mess with me. His anger further inflamed. He tore the paper to threads and trampled on the pieces that fell to the floor. Watching this, I reached behind the clock placed in the entryway. What's that? Can't you see it? It's a camera. No way. Ben turned pale and stumbled backward. I had set up video cameras in the entryway, anticipating that he might come barging in angrily. In fact, I had installed 3 cameras at different angles. Well, since you threatened that unfortunate things might happen around us, it was necessary for security and vigilance, right? When I checked the footage from one of the cameras, it had perfectly captured all of Ben's behavior. I'm sure the other cameras recorded similar footage as well. We intend to submit this to the police as evidence, and we've hired a lawyer to get Michael back, whom you took from my daughter. What are you talking about? Poor people like you can't afford a lawyer. We found a kind lawyer. When I posted about Ben's misdeeds on social media, I also wrote about my daughter's terrible situation. A lawyer contacted us saying, I want to help you out of goodwill. The things Ben cherished most were his male heir, his job, and his social status. Realizing he would lose all of these, he was left in a daze for a while. Then Ben crouched down in the entryway and began to cower. Please forgive me. I was wrong. We've known that for a long time, haven't we? I'm sure my eyes were cold as I looked down at Ben. He started trembling and whimpering as if he had seen something terrifying. Let me tell you, I have no intention of ever forgiving you for what you did to Maggie and Charlotte. Even if Maggie forgives you, I will never forgive you. Then I called out to Maggie, who was in the back room. I called the police. They should be arriving soon. Actually, the moment Ben arrived, I had instructed my daughter to hide in the back room and contact the police. Ben's eyes nearly popped out of his head as he desperately clung to my feet. Please wait. Please help me. If I'm arrested by the police, I'm finished. Finished? Isn't this the comeuppance for looking down on women all this time? Anyway, could you please not touch me? When I shook off his hands, Ben turned his back to flee from the house, flinging open the front door. However, police officers were already waiting there. I handed over the camera footage to the police as evidence. Then I glared at Ben with stern eyes. All your actions have been recorded as evidence. From now on, you'll face the judgment of the law. And so Ben was stuffed into a police car crying, and my daughter and I watched until the car was out of sight. After that, Maggie and Ben's divorce was finalized. Maggie not only got Michael back, but also claimed $220,000 in damages and $800 per month in child support. And so Maggie, Charlotte, and Michael began their new life in my house. I believe we'll surely be able to live a happy life together from now on, and I'll do whatever it takes to ensure that happens. Surrounded by my daughter and grandchildren, I'm filled with anticipation for our new life ahead. Story 2. Coming home from work, I found my husband and 10-year-old daughter collapsed in the living room. At the hospital, the doctor said, they are. The next day, a police officer appeared and said something terrifying. It was, my name is Sarah Thompson, and I'm 38 years old. I live in a small town on the outskirts of Boston with my husband, Michael, and our 10-year-old daughter, Emily. During the week, I teach fourth grade at the local elementary school, and on weekends I cherish time with my family. I still vividly remember 15 years ago, when I was in college. A young man sat next to me in the library while I was studying. His name was Michael. We talked about literature and hit it off right away. After that, we went on many dates and got married after graduation. Michael got a job at a local construction company, and I fulfilled my dream of becoming a teacher. When Emily was born, it felt like our happiness had reached its peak. Lately, Michael's been coming home late more often, and I'm starting to worry, but he just says, "I'm busy with work." Emily seems lonely not seeing her father as much. Still, we're a happy family. On weekends, we have picnics in the park or watch movies together. But recently, I've started to feel that something's not quite right. Who could have imagined that an unexpected shadow was creeping into these peaceful days? On Friday afternoon, I was able to leave school earlier than usual. As I walked home, my steps felt lighter at the thought of having dinner together as a family, something we hadn't done in a while. When I arrived at the front door and unlocked it, an unnatural silence enveloped me. Usually, I'd hear the TV or Emily's laughter. "Michael? Emily," I called out as I headed to the living room. What I saw there took my breath away. Michael and Emily were lying on the floor. "Michael! Emily!" I screamed as I rushed to them. Michael was breathing with difficulty, and Emily seemed to be having a seizure. I was on the verge of panic, but took a deep breath and told myself to stay calm. I immediately called 911 and requested an ambulance. Following the operator's instructions, I checked on them. Neither was conscious, but they were barely breathing. "It's okay, Emily. Daddy's okay too. Mommy's here." I held my daughter's hand and whispered with a shaky voice. A few minutes later, I heard sirens. The paramedics arrived and quickly loaded them onto stretchers. I was allowed to ride in the ambulance. When we arrived at the hospital, Michael and Emily were immediately taken into the treatment room. I waited in the waiting room, feeling overwhelmed by anxiety and fear. Why did this happen to them? If only I had come home earlier. Such thoughts raced through my mind. After about an hour, a doctor finally appeared. "Mrs. Thompson?" "Yes, that's me." "How are they?" I stood up desperately, trying to read the doctor's expression. "They're both out of immediate danger." However, the doctor paused for a moment and looked straight into my eyes. "They're showing symptoms of acute poisoning." "Did they eat or drink anything unusual?" "Poisoning? No, that's impossible." I was confused and at a loss for words. When I said goodbye to them this morning, everything seemed fine. "Mrs. Thompson, we've also contacted the police. Sometimes symptoms like these." As the doctor's words trailed off, a terrible thought crossed my mind. Could someone have intentionally? "No, that's impossible." I couldn't help but cry out. The doctor looked at me sympathetically and said quietly, "Please talk to the police when they arrive. We'll do our best to treat them." With that, the doctor left. I collapsed into a chair and covered my face with my hands. I couldn't understand what was happening. I desperately tried to recall the events of the morning. Michael left for work early. I saw Emily off to school, and then I went to work. It should have been a normal morning, but why were they showing symptoms of poisoning? And the police? My heart felt like it was being crushed by anxiety and fear, but I had to be strong for Michael and Emily. I took a deep breath and tried to regain my composure bit by bit. Tomorrow will surely be tough, but for the sake of my family, I'll overcome anything. After spending the night at the hospital, I was finally able to return home as the sun was rising. Michael and Emily's conditions were stable, but they still hadn't regained consciousness. As I opened the front door with my exhausted body, 2 police officers were standing there. "Are you Mrs. Sarah Thompson?" the tall male officer asked. "Yes, I am," I answered, confused. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about yesterday's incident," the female officer said. I invited them into the house. As we sat in the living room, the male officer began to speak. "Could you tell us in detail about yesterday's events?" I explained as accurately as possible everything from yesterday morning until I returned home. The officers listened intently, occasionally taking notes. "Mrs. Thompson, have you had any disputes with your husband or daughter?" the female officer suddenly asked. "Huh? No, nothing like that," I answered, surprised. "You see, the symptoms of your husband and daughter suggest the possibility of intentional poisoning," the male officer said quietly. At those words, my heart began to race. "Are you suspecting me?" The officers looked at each other, and the male officer carefully chose his words. At this point, We can't rule out any possibilities. We ask for your cooperation." After that, they began to search the house. I watched their movements in a daze. Suddenly, the female officer in the kitchen called out, "There's a suspicious container here." What she held in her hand was a small bottle I didn't recognize. The label read pesticide. I don't know about this. It's not mine." I desperately pleaded. The officers seized the bottle as evidence and took my fingerprints. "We'll need you to wait at the station until we get the results of the comparison." Feeling dejected, I was taken to the police station. As I spent a long time in the interrogation room, various thoughts crossed my mind. Why is this happening? There's no way I would hurt my family. But that bottle, and Michael's recent behavior. The interrogator came in and sat down with a stern expression. "Mrs. Thompson, your fingerprints were found on the bottle." At those words, I felt my world crumbling. "That's impossible. I didn't touch it." "Then why were your fingerprints on it?" The interrogator's eyes pierced through me. "I don't know. I really don't know," I answered, fighting back tears. The questioning continued, but all I could do was plead my innocence. Just as fatigue and confusion were making my head fuzzy, the interrogator left the room for a moment. Alone in the room, I thought deeply. The only way out of this situation is to uncover the truth myself. But how? At that moment, a possibility crossed my mind. Could it be? Just as I had that thought, the interrogator came back into the room. "Mrs. Thompson, your bail has been granted. However, as the investigation is ongoing, please don't leave town for the time being." I left the station with mixed feelings. I must take action to uncover the truth and protect my family. As I left the police station, I was organizing my next steps in my head. To reveal the truth, I had to find evidence with my own hands. Just as I made that decision, my cell phone rang. Looking at the screen, I saw it was from my sister, Lisa. "Sarah, I heard what happened. I'm on my way there now." Lisa's voice was filled with worry. Our relationship as sisters was complicated, and we hadn't been in touch much for the past few years. Memories of past conflicts resurfaced. 10 years ago, when our parents' company was on the brink of bankruptcy, Lisa embezzled company funds for her own future. I tried to stop her, but Lisa wouldn't listen. In the end, the company went bankrupt, and our parents lost everything. Since then, our relationship had remained strained. "Lisa, you don't need to come. I can handle this on my own." "No, Sarah, you can't do this alone. There must be something I can do." Lisa's strong tone made me lose the will to argue. "All right, but I'm going to the hospital first." At the hospital, the doctor informed me that there was no significant change in Michael and Emily's conditions. As I looked at their faces in the hospital room, I couldn't stop my tears. I vowed in my heart to prove my innocence and get my family back. As I left the hospital, Lisa was waiting. "Sarah, is what the police are saying true?" I took a deep breath and answered, "No, I would never hurt my family." Lisa nodded silently. "I understand. Let's think about what we can do together." We went into a nearby cafe and started to sort out the situation. First, we needed to find out where the pesticide bottle came from. "Sarah, try to remember all your actions. Is there anything you might have overlooked?" Lisa asked with a serious look. I desperately traced my memories. Then I suddenly realized, come to think of it, I went to the home improvement store last Saturday, but I didn't buy any pesticide. Lisa's eyes lit up. "That's it. Maybe someone impersonated you to make the purchase." I found hope in that possibility. We immediately headed to the home improvement store. We explained the situation to the store manager and negotiated to see the surveillance camera footage. The store manager, who was initially reluctant, agreed to cooperate after seeing our desperate situation. As we checked the security camera footage, a surprising scene caught our eyes. The screen showed a woman who indeed looked very similar to me. But looking closely, the details were different. The person stopped in front of the pesticide shelf and picked up a bottle. "This is it." I couldn't help but exclaim. "But this person isn't me." Lisa was also staring intently at the screen. "Wait, this person." We looked at each other. The person looked exactly like our cousin Jenny. Could it be Jenny? I looked at Lisa in disbelief. But why would Jenny? Lisa also looked confused. We rushed to the police station and presented this new evidence. The police started a reinvestigation and began to confirm Jenny's identity and whereabouts. A few days later, we received a call from the police. They said Jenny had been arrested. The interrogation revealed shocking facts. Jenny had apparently been jealous of my life for years. a happy family, a stable job, and above all, the trust of our parents. Jenny had plotted to take all of that away. Why would Jenny go that far? I listened to the police officer's explanation while crying. However, mysteries still remain. How did Jenny enter the house and mix in the pesticide? And why were only Michael and Emily affected? The path to the truth is not over yet, but with this glimmer of hope, strength welled up in my heart. I must continue to fight to protect my family and reveal the truth. Lisa put her hand on my shoulder. Sarah, let's get through this together. I won't leave you alone again. My sister's words filled me with warmth. It's time to overcome our past conflicts and join forces as sisters. The journey to uncover the truth continues, but I'm not alone anymore. With the bond of family and a new bond with my sister, I continue to move forward. As the police investigation progressed, Lisa and I continued to pursue the truth on our own. Even after Jenny's arrest, there were still many points that didn't make sense. One day, I noticed something odd about Lisa's behavior. Her voice trembled when we talked on the phone, and she avoided eye contact. It was clear she was hiding something. Lisa, you know something, don't you? I looked at my sister with a serious gaze. After a long silence, Lisa finally spoke. Sarah, I'm so sorry. And then a shocking truth was revealed. Jenny's plan was actually devised by Lisa. But why? I asked in disbelief. Lisa began to explain through tears. She had been jealous of my life for years. The trust from our parents, a stable job, a happy family. Lisa had plotted to take it all away. But in the very end, I lost my courage, so I asked Jenny to do it. I was at a loss for words. My heart, which had believed in the bond between sisters, was shattered into pieces. But an even more shocking fact awaited. Michael's affair and his conspiracy in this plan were revealed. Lisa continued. Michael was just an affair partner at first, but he also wanted to hurt you. In my mind, all the recent events started to connect rapidly. Michael's late returns, his cold attitude, everything started to make sense. Emily? I asked with a trembling voice. We didn't intend to involve Emily, but Michael. Lisa's voice trailed off. My body shook with anger and sadness, but now is not the time to be swept away by emotions. I must act calmly for Emily's sake and for my own. Lisa, you're going to tell the police everything, right? I said quietly but firmly. Lisa nodded. Yes, I'll tell them everything, and I'll accept my punishment. We headed to the police station. Lisa's testimony revealed the full extent of the incident. Michael and Jenny were rearrested and subjected to questioning. However, this wasn't the end of everything. I still had something I needed to do. I returned to the hospital and sat beside Emily, who had regained consciousness. Emily, Mommy's here. Everything's going to be all right now. While holding my daughter's small hand, I made a firm decision. We would overcome this experience and start a new life. A few weeks later, the trial began. I stood on the witness stand and told the whole truth. Lisa, Michael, Jenny, their actions were unforgivable, but I didn't harbor any feelings of revenge. Instead, I said to the judge, please give them appropriate punishment. However, Emily and I will begin a new life. We want to live looking forward without being trapped by the past. After the trial, Emily and I decided to start a new life in a different town. Lisa is serving her time in prison. Sometimes I receive letters from her. Sarah, I'm truly sorry. I finally understand your strength and kindness. I smiled as I read that letter. I believe people can change. Emily is regaining her strength day by day. Every time I see her smile, I make a vow. No matter what difficulties may await us, we can overcome them. As we ate dinner together in our new home, just Emily and me, I thought to myself, this is our new beginning, and this beginning is full of hope. A year has passed since the trial, and Emily and I have gotten used to our new life. We're living in a quiet suburban house, helping each other through each day. One day, I received a request from Lisa for a visit. I was hesitant, but with Emily's encouragement, I decided to go to the prison. Sarah, thank you for coming to see me, Lisa said with tears in her eyes. Emily said she wanted to see her aunt. I answered quietly. Lisa took a deep breath and began to speak. For the past year, I've been reflecting every day. When I think about the pain I caused you and Emily, my heart feels like it's going to break. I listened silently. Lisa continued, I'm not asking for forgiveness, but after I'm released, I want to make amends to you both. Those words spread warmth in my heart. Lisa, we're sisters. It might take time, but I believe we can walk together again. A look of relief appeared on Lisa's face. Sarah, thank you. After the visit, on my way home, I thought to myself, family bonds can sometimes be hurt and almost broken, but the power to repair them also lies within the family. A few months later, I received a letter from Michael. Sarah, Emily, I'm truly sorry. I deeply realize my own foolishness and weakness. Emily, Daddy can't come back, but I'll always love you. Emily cried as she read the letter. I hugged my daughter and said, Emily, Daddy made mistakes, but his love for you is real. Let's keep moving forward together. Emily nodded through her tears. At that moment, I felt the bond between us, mother and daughter, grow even stronger. Over the next few years, our lives gradually but steadily moved in a positive direction. Emily made new friends at school, and I started getting involved in the local community. After her release, Lisa moved close to us. At first, we were both hesitant, but gradually we began to rebuild our relationship as sisters. One weekend, the three of us went on a picnic. Under the blue sky, on the green grass, Emily was running around happily. Sarah, I never thought a day like this would come, Lisa said softly. Yes, but this is our new beginning, I answered with a smile. At that moment, Emily came running with a bouquet of flowers in her hand. Mom, Aunt, these are for you. Lisa and I accepted the flowers from Emily. At that instant, I strongly felt the love flowing between the three of us. Hey Lisa, I said to my sister, let's keep walking this path together. Lisa nodded with tears in her eyes. Yes, together, as a family. That evening when we got home, Emily picked up her father's photo for the first time in a long while. Mom, have you forgiven Dad? I thought deeply. It might be difficult to forgive completely, but we shouldn't forget the good things about Dad either. Everyone makes mistakes. What's important is how we live afterwards. Emily nodded quietly. I want to be strong like you, Mom. Those words brought tears to my eyes. Emily, you're already strong enough. Let's keep getting stronger together. We hugged, enveloped in warm feelings. A new morning came. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed to herald the beginning of our new life. Overcoming the pain of the past, reaffirming family bonds, and starting to walk towards a new future. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, well, it's the start of a new day. May today be another happy day. Then I headed upstairs to wake Emily. Our new story has just begun. I'm truly looking forward to seeing what wonderful chapters await us. Story 3. My daughter died from massive bleeding during childbirth. When I begged to open the coffin for a final goodbye, her husband stubbornly refused. My husband and I investigated and uncovered a shocking truth. It was, no way. What? I received a call that my daughter, who was in her final month of pregnancy, had died during childbirth. Apparently, she had already been returned home, so my husband and I rushed over immediately. When I saw my daughter's body in the casket, I nearly collapsed from grief. But when I looked at her face through the small window of the coffin, something felt off. As I instinctively reached out to touch her, my son-in-law hurriedly stopped me. What's more, no matter how much I begged him to open the lid for a final farewell, he stubbornly refused. Something was wrong. When I found a moment to examine my daughter's body discreetly, I, as a nurse, was certain this was neither illness nor accident. It was undoubtedly murder. I'm Patricia. I worked as a nurse for 40 years and am now retired as a homemaker. My daughter, Monica, was also a nurse, and she got married at 30. Her partner was Paul, whom she met in college. But when we were introduced to him, my husband and I felt he was somewhat unreliable. You see, when Monica said she wanted to marry Paul, he was a part-time worker. Although he had the respectable qualification of a pharmacist, he hadn't taken up that profession after graduating from college. So we opposed it and set the condition that we would approve their marriage once Paul started working full-time and had a stable income. However, Paul couldn't find a job, and partly at Monica's request, my husband reluctantly had him hired at the pharmaceutical company where he worked. Just when we thought Paul was working diligently, his sales performance was terrible, and according to his supervisor, Paul was always slacking off and had quite a bad reputation with clients. As a result, his salary seemed to be low, and their lifestyle apparently depended on Monica's nursing job. In the midst of this, Monica's pregnancy was confirmed. Don't overdo it. I told her to take care of herself as her job involved standing most of the time. Monica replied in a calm voice, It's okay. Emily's here. Emily was Monica's friend from college, and she also had a relationship with Paul. Emily was a midwife working at a maternity clinic near Monica's apartment, and since Monica's workplace didn't have an obstetric department, she decided to give birth there. Monica's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and I was looking forward to the birth of my first grandchild. However, as the due date approached, I suddenly received a call from Paul. It can't be true. What? I couldn't believe what I heard on the phone, and my mind went blank. He said that Monica had died during childbirth. I'll come right away. It's at Emily's hospital, right? But Paul stammered and said, Monica passed away yesterday, and her body has already been brought home and placed in a coffin. Why didn't you tell me immediately? I stopped myself from saying the words that were about to come out, thinking it would be a waste of time to argue over the phone. My husband and I headed to our daughter's apartment. What on earth happened? We confronted Paul together. I'm sorry. I couldn't believe Monica was gone either, so I couldn't make the call. He seemed so distraught that he couldn't properly answer my questions. Seeing this, his friend Emily explained, it was due to massive bleeding. Apparently, she had been by Monica's side the whole time. And then I had a sorrowful encounter with my daughter. My husband next to me couldn't hold back his tears and sobbed when he looked at Monica's form through the small window of the coffin. It was when I peeked in too. Something was off. I felt it instinctively. As a nurse myself, I had seen pregnant women lose their lives during childbirth before, so I knew that the most common cause of death was massive bleeding. But something about my daughter's face was different from that. When I instinctively reached out to touch my daughter, Paul and Emily hurriedly stopped me. Then please open the lid of the coffin. That's not allowed by the funeral home. But this is my last goodbye to Monica. I wanted to confirm my suspicions more clearly, so I asked Paul, but he flatly refused. Thinking I had to investigate somehow, I asked Emily to buy some drinks, and after she left, I signaled to my husband with my eyes. He seemed to understand immediately and took Paul outside on some pretext. Taking that opportunity, I opened the lid of the coffin and examined my daughter's body. And my sense of unease turned into certainty, just as I thought. It was so shocking that I felt dizzy and could barely stand still. I managed to close the lid just before the three returned from outside. Suddenly feeling nauseous from thinking about too many things, I said, "Excuse me for a moment," and left the room, rushing to the apartment building's parking lot. Not wanting to be seen by many people, I crouched in a shadowy spot. When two figures came there, these people didn't seem to notice I was there and started arguing. From their conversation, I learned yet another shocking truth. I could feel an uncontrollable anger welling up inside me. A while later, when I returned to the room, Paul had just finished discussing with the funeral director, who left saying, "Then tomorrow." Wondering what tomorrow meant, I asked, and my husband informed me. "The funeral has been set for tomorrow. There's no need to rush like that. There won't be time to notify Monica's friends and acquaintances if it's tomorrow then." Paul sneered. "You might not know, but small family funerals are the norm these days. We don't need to make a big fuss. Just seeing her off with just us is fine." Even Emily agreed with the family funeral, saying, "Monica's friends are busy and can't attend." She herself would attend, but she wouldn't listen to my opinion. Thinking it was pointless to argue further, I decided to hurry home. After all, I had a lot to do. When I got home, I noticed an envelope in the mailbox. It was a letter from Monica addressed to me, and from the postmark, I could tell it was probably mailed the day before she gave birth. I hastily opened it, and inside were Monica's hopes for the future overflowing. "I'm writing this letter because it's embarrassing to say face to face," it began, followed by expressions of gratitude to us. Next, her hopes for the child to be born. Since she knew it was going to be a girl, she wrote in dancing letters that she wanted to name her Emma. And as for what Monica wanted to do for her daughter, many things were listed. Finally, it concluded with, "I think I'll be relying on you a lot from now on, so please take care of us." My husband and I couldn't stop our tears as we read the letter over and over again. After crying for a while, I decided to take revenge for Monica. As preparation, I contacted various parties and made several arrangements. I also had one important request from my husband. This was the beginning of our counterattack. After that, I headed to the hospital to do the most important thing. And the next day, which was supposed to be the day of the family funeral, neither my husband nor I left the house. Then in the early afternoon, Paul came barging in with Emily, yelling, "What's the meaning of this?" When I went to the funeral home, They said Monica's funeral had been canceled. It was your doing, wasn't it? Paul glared at us, while Emily frowned beside him. That's not all. When I went to the hospital, they said you had taken the baby Monica gave birth to. What's going on? Well, wouldn't it be pitiful for Emma to be left alone in the hospital without her mother, Monica? Since there were no particular problems with Emma's health, when I presented my ID at the hospital and explained the situation, they let me take Emma. Emma. Emily looked puzzled. It's the baby's name, isn't it lovely? Then Paul approached me, his anger showing. Don't name her without my permission. It wasn't me. Monica chose the name. Look here. I held out my daughter's letter in front of him. Paul stumbled over his words. Well, that's fine then. But about the funeral. I interrupted him and glared. I looked into the funeral home you arranged, and they had a bad reputation, so I changed it to one I know. They didn't have an opening, so the funeral will be in a week, but that's okay, right? When I said this all at once, Paul glared back at me with bulging eyes. Don't do things on your own without consulting me. Oh, is there some problem with delaying the funeral? When I asked Paul, who was expressing his dissatisfaction, he fell silent. When I said, see you in a week then, and ushered them to the door, they reluctantly left. And a week later, many people had gathered at the funeral home to see Monica off. When I contacted Monica's friends, they all said they would make time to come and say goodbye. After all the attendees had gathered, I stepped forward and stood in front of the microphone. Thank you all for gathering here today for Monica. Before we begin the funeral, there's something I'd like to share with everyone. As I started speaking, Paul stood up and raised his voice. I didn't hear about this. However, I ignored him and continued. It's the public reading of my daughter's will. Huh? A will? Paul was surprised but grinned for a moment. I didn't miss that, and as the venue fell silent in the presence of a lawyer, I began to read the will. The opening was filled with words of gratitude to Monica's stepfather. My husband is Monica's adoptive father. My ex-husband was wealthy, and when we first married, I was often bad-mouthed as a mere nurse after his money. In the end, unable to get along with his family, I left the house with Monica. After that, I met my current husband and married him when Monica was in kindergarten. We couldn't have children together, but my husband loved Monica as if she were his own. Some of the attendees who didn't know this fact were tearing up. That's all irrelevant. Hurry up and read the important part. Isn't that what everyone's curious about? I ignored Paul's urging and continued reading. Monica's biological father had passed away when she was in college. At that time, Monica inherited a substantial estate. The amount was about $3 million, and Monica wanted us to use that money, but it had nothing to do with me, and I had no reason to accept anything from my ex-husband. So when I advised Monica, keep it. It might come in handy someday. She entrusted the management of the inheritance to a lawyer. In that case, as Monica's husband, I have the right to receive her inheritance, right? Paul grinned happily, and I smiled as I informed him. But you know, Monica said the amount was too large for her. So after consulting with the lawyer, she donated most of it. What? Then how much is left? Paul made a fuss upon hearing about the donation. When the lawyer announced the remaining amount, Paul sighed in relief. So $1 million remain. Well, I guess that's fine. However, the will states that the inheritance is to be divided equally among Monica's parents and her child to be born. When I announced the distribution of the inheritance, Paul's face turned red with anger. What? You've got to be kidding. What was the point of me marrying Monica then? The attendees looked at the shouting Paul with contempt, but he didn't notice. No matter how much you complain, this will is official and won't change, as I told him while looking him in the eye. Paul's face grew even redder, and he approached Monica's coffin. What are you doing? I have to give this girl a piece of my mind. He vigorously opened the lid of the coffin, but Paul's movement stopped when he looked inside. Why? To his surprise, my daughter's body wasn't there. I thrust a piece of paper at the surprised Paul. Look at this. It was the autopsy report of Monica's body examination. From the moment I had that sorrowful encounter with my daughter, I had been suspicious of her death. And when I opened Monica's coffin and saw her body, that suspicion turned into certainty. This was murder. So I consulted a doctor I knew, explained the situation, and he also felt it was strange. So he introduced me to a friend who was a medical examiner. And that person agreed to perform an autopsy on my daughter. Look closely. It says right here that the cause of Monica's death was neither illness nor accident. As people in the venue gasped in surprise, I continued. She was killed by a drug. The name of the drug is clearly written here. You did this, didn't you? As I confronted Paul, he stepped back. Actually, I had changed the funeral home to buy time for this autopsy, and I had the help of an acquaintance who was in charge there. Presented with the autopsy report, Paul was at a loss for words. Emily quietly approached Paul's side and whispered something in his ear. Then Paul suddenly looked up and grinned triumphantly. Sure, Monica might have died because of drugs, but that's irrelevant. Do you have any evidence that I used the drug? To the confident Paul, my husband now presented a ledger. It was from the pharmaceutical company where my husband had worked until retirement. In other words, it was the drug inventory ledger of the company where Paul worked. After my husband and his former subordinate carefully cross-checked the ledger with the drug inventory in the warehouse, it was discovered that the same drug that took Monica's life was missing. And there was only one person who entered the warehouse on the day that drug went missing. It's recorded in the company data. On that day, you, Paul, were the only one who went in and out of the warehouse. Paul's face gradually turned pale. However, this time Emily stepped forward in front of me. That could be a coincidence, and you can't conclude that the drug used on Monica was from Paul's company. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. I took out my smartphone from my pocket and played an audio recording. It contained a conversation between a man and a woman. These are your voices, right? There was no need to confirm, as the man and woman in the audio data were calling each other Paul and Emily. I had turned the volume up to maximum, so the conversation echoed throughout the funeral home. Their argument was clearly recorded. On that day when I was hit by nausea, it was them arguing in the apartment building's parking lot. Thinking this could be evidence, I quickly activated my smartphone's voice recorder and recorded their conversation. I could have reported it to the police on the spot, but I decided to investigate myself in case other evidence might be destroyed. Of course, I also wanted to exact revenge with my own hands. The audio clearly recorded that they had killed Monica for her inheritance, and that Paul and Emily were having an affair. From the moment they learned that my daughter had received an inheritance during her college days, the two had been looking for an opportunity to kill her. For them, Monica's pregnancy was a chance. It was, of course, Emily who advised Monica to give birth at the hospital where she worked. Thus, during the confusion of my daughter's delivery, Emily injected Monica with the drug Paul had prepared. Moreover, you abandoned my suffering daughter and even tried to take the life of her child, didn't you? Of course. After all, if we didn't, Paul's share would be smaller. Emily was defiant and said this with an expression as if it was nothing. But unfortunately, the baby was saved because a part-time doctor performed emergency surgery on Monica. I felt sadness welling up beyond anger towards Emily. I didn't want to hear such terrible words from Emily, who was in a profession so close to life as a midwife. If only there was no child, I could have received that share of money too. Paul had even instructed Emily to take the child out of the hospital and dispose of it. Paul, so obsessed with money, didn't have a shred of affection for his own child. The venue was in an uproar, with some people looking at the two with angry eyes and others bursting into tears. That's why I took Emma from the hospital, to protect her from your hands. As I coldly declared this, Paul tried to lunge at me. However, my husband and the people around us caught Paul, and he was pathetically pinned to the floor. The police will be here soon. Give it up. I had asked the lawyer to notify the police at the right time. But the child is actually safe, and Monica would be happy. From now on, I'll raise my daughter with love. So please just don't call the police. Paul suddenly became timid and pleaded. Don't be ridiculous. People like you should rot in hell. I will never forgive you. Soon we could hear police sirens in the distance, and as they were dragged away by the arriving officers, they were still crying and screaming. Please forgive us. We don't want to go to the police. After that, Paul and Emily ended up in prison for this incident. The lawyer told me that those who take a life have no inheritance rights, so Paul couldn't even receive the inheritance that remained as his legal portion. Paul was fired from his company, and Emily had her midwife license revoked. A dark life awaits them where they'll have to crawl on the ground. But that's no longer our concern, and we don't have time to worry about such things. After all, we're very busy with child care. For the first time in 30 years. That being said, it's very enjoyable, and every day is fulfilling. We've decided to use all the inheritance Monica left for Emma's sake, and everything that Monica wrote she wanted to do for Emma as a mother, we now want to do in her place. Story 4. I came home from work to find my son being taken away by ambulance. He pleaded with me, "Don't tell Dad." When we arrived at the hospital, my husband was already there. The reason why was beyond my wildest imagination. My name is Sarah Johnson. I'm 38 years old and live in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. Weekday mornings are always hectic. I jump out of bed as soon as my alarm goes off at 6:30 a.m. My husband, Michael, 42, has already finished getting ready for work and is sipping coffee in the kitchen. "Good morning, Sarah. Looks like another busy day ahead," he says. "Yes, but I'll manage. I'm used to it by now," I reply. I work at a local advertising agency. The job is demanding but fulfilling. After a hurried breakfast, I head upstairs to wake our 17-year-old son, Ethan. "Ethan, time to get up," I call out. "Just a little longer," he mumbles. Ethan is a high school senior with college applications looming. He's been under a lot of stress lately. He's had anxiety issues since he was young, and his symptoms tend to flare up when he's feeling pressured. "Did you take your medication?" I ask. Yes, I'm fine," Ethan answers, rubbing his sleepy eyes. We've been dealing with his anxiety as a family. It took Michael some time to understand our son's condition, but he's supportive now. After finishing our morning routines, we all head out separately. Michael works as a middle manager at a large pharmaceutical company. Ethan takes the school bus, and I drive my own car to work. In the evening, when I return home after finishing work, we gather as a family for dinner. Tonight's menu is Ethan's favorite, lasagna. We sit around the table sharing stories about our day. "Ethan, how was your day? Are you making progress with your college applications?" Michael asks. "Yes, I'm getting there," Ethan answers, looking a bit tense. My husband and I have high hopes for our son's future. Michael in particular seems keen on Ethan attending his alma mater, Ohio State University. Sometimes I worry that our expectations might be putting too much pressure on Ethan. After dinner, Ethan retreats to his room to study. Michael checks some work documents, and I prepare for the next day. Before bedtime, I knock on Ethan's door. "Did you take your medication? Let's do our best tomorrow too," I say. "Yes, thanks," he replies. It's a peaceful routine, but little did we know that this tranquility was about to be shaken to its core. On Friday afternoon, I left work early to head home. I had a big presentation coming up over the weekend and wanted to focus on preparing at home. As I drove, I was thinking about what to make for dinner. Should I make tacos, Ethan's favorite, or steak, which Michael loves? As I entered our quiet residential area, I heard sirens in the distance. I wonder if someone's fallen ill, I thought as I continued driving. But as the sound of sirens grew louder, a sense of unease crept over me. As I approached our house, I was stunned by the sight before me. An ambulance was parked in front of our home, with paramedics bustling about. My heart began to race. I hastily parked the car and rushed to the front door. It was wide open, and I could hear voices coming from inside. "Ethan? Michael?" I called out as I burst into the house. I saw Ethan being placed on a stretcher in the living room. His face was pale, and he seemed to be struggling to breathe. "Are you the mother?" one of the paramedics asked me. "Yes, I am. What happened to my son?" "Your son called 911 himself. It seems he's having a severe anxiety attack." I locked eyes with Ethan. He was trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. "Ethan, it's okay. Mom's here," I said, grasping his hand. With great effort, Ethan managed to squeeze out a few words. "Mom, don't tell Dad." I was confused by his words. Why shouldn't we tell his father? Did something happen? Questions began swirling in my mind. "Ethan, what do you mean?" But Ethan was struggling to breathe again and couldn't speak. "Ma'am, your son's condition isn't stable. We need to transport him to the hospital immediately," the paramedic informed me. "I understand. I'll come along." I quickly grabbed my wallet and phone, then climbed into the ambulance. I sat next to Ethan, holding his hand. Beads of cold sweat had formed on his forehead. As the ambulance drove off, I debated whether to contact Michael. Ethan's words kept replaying in my mind. Why doesn't he want me to tell his dad? Is there something he's hiding? During the ride to the hospital, my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and worry. Ethan's condition, his mysterious words, everything was puzzling, and I couldn't find any answers. Upon arrival at the hospital, Ethan was immediately taken to the treatment room. I was told to wait in the waiting area, where I finally had a moment to catch my breath. I took out my phone torn about whether to contact Michael. He has a right to know, but I can't ignore Ethan's words either. In the end, I decided to send just a simple message. Work's running late. Have dinner without me. I don't like lying, but right now I wanted to respect Ethan's wishes, and I felt a growing need to uncover the truth behind this situation. I sat down in a chair in the waiting room and closed my eyes. In my mind, I tried to piece together the events of the day. How could an ordinary Friday afternoon turn into this? Little did I know that this incident would become a turning point in our family's life. As I sat in the hospital waiting room, I tried to calm my racing thoughts with deep breaths. The wall clock seemed to be moving unusually slowly. Around me, other people waited for news about their loved ones, all wearing similar expressions of tension. Mrs. Johnson, a nurse's voice snapped me back to reality. Yes, that's me. How are they? I responded. Your son's condition has stabilized. Please follow me. As the nurse led me to the treatment room, the white corridors and smell of disinfectant heightened my anxiety. When I opened the door, I saw Ethan lying on the bed. His color had improved somewhat, but he still looked exhausted. Ethan, are you all right? I asked. Ethan nodded slightly. Yes, sorry for worrying you, he said. The attending physician approached us. Mrs. Johnson, your son experienced a severe anxiety attack, but he's stable now. We'll need to keep him under observation for a while, but I think he'll be able to go home tonight. I let out a sigh of relief. Thank you, doctor. After the doctor left, I sat down next to Ethan. Ethan, what happened? And why don't you want me to tell your father? Ethan averted his eyes and paused for a moment as if choosing his words carefully. Mom, I don't want to talk about it now, but please promise me you won't tell Dad. The serious look in his eyes convinced me that something significant had occurred. I understand, but when you're feeling better, we need to talk about this, okay? Ethan nodded slightly. At that moment, something crystallized within me. All the years I devoted to our family, the trust we built. It felt like I could hear it all crumbling in an instant. Mom, is it my fault that our family is falling apart? Ethan's voice trembled. I shook my head firmly. No, Ethan. This is the result of your father's choices. You've done nothing wrong. As I said those words, a sense of resolve solidified within me. I needed to handle this situation properly. For my relationship with Michael, for our family's future, and most importantly, for Ethan's happiness. Ethan, Mom needs to take care of a few things now, but I promise I'll always put you first in everything I do. Ethan looked at me with worried eyes, but his expression gradually shifted to one of relief. Mom, thank you. That night, Ethan was discharged from the hospital. On our way home, we talked quietly in the car. We decided to tell Michael that Ethan had just experienced a mild hyperventilation. Now that I knew the truth, I wasn't sure how to face Michael. The next morning, I woke up early and headed to the living room. Michael was still asleep. As I brewed coffee, I tried to organize the events of the past day and plan my next steps. First, I needed to gather evidence. I had to confirm the photos Ethan had mentioned, but accessing Michael's computer might be challenging. Next, I needed legal advice. If I was considering divorce, I need to consult a trustworthy lawyer. Most importantly, I had to take care of Ethan. I needed to minimize the impact of this situation on him. As I formulated my plan, a whirlwind of emotions churned in my chest. Anger, sadness, the pain of betrayal. But I couldn't let these feelings overwhelm me. I had to act calmly and wisely. First, I sat down at the computer. I searched for reputable divorce lawyers in the area and sent an email to schedule a consultation. Then I checked the websites of private investigation agencies to understand how to request an investigation. Before Michael woke up, I got ready and left the house. On my way to the lawyer's office, I sent a message to Ethan. Mom's going out for a bit. Call me if you need anything. The meeting with the lawyer was more reassuring than I had expected. Jennifer Brown, the attorney, understood my situation and provided level-headed advice. Sarah, gathering evidence is crucial. We need to collect as much information as possible. Proof of infidelity, documents showing the existence of a hidden child, and so on. I nod, taking notes. Also, we need to check your financial situation. Make sure you have a clear understanding of all assets, bank accounts, real estate, investments, everything. Jennifer explained in detail about my rights and the procedures ahead. As I listened, I felt my anxiety gradually easing. We'll file for divorce mediation once we have all the evidence. There's no need to rush. Let's proceed carefully for the sake of your and Ethan's future. After leaving the lawyer's office, I made my next decision. I needed to check the contents of Michael's computer, but how? When I returned home, Ethan greeted me with a worried look. Mom, are you okay? Okay, I hugged my son. Yes, I'm okay, Ethan. Let's talk. We sat on the living room sofa, and I explained my plan to Ethan. I told him about the possibility of divorce, the need to gather evidence, and most importantly, that his feelings were my top priority. Ethan, things might get tough from now on, but Mom will protect you. We'll get through this together. Ethan nodded silently and gently squeezed my hand. Mom, I'll do my best too. I'll help with Dad's computer. His words brought tears to my eyes. I was deeply grateful for my son's strength and kindness. The road ahead won't be easy, but I believe that if Ethan and I walk it together, we can overcome anything. With that belief, we began preparing to take our first steps into our new life. 6 months have passed since Ethan and I took our first steps into our new life. During this time, we've faced many challenges, but we've overcome them by supporting each other. Gathering evidence was more difficult than I had anticipated. Extracting data from Michael's computer required Ethan's help. His courage and determination touched my heart many times. The divorce mediation dragged on, leaving us mentally and physically exhausted. At first, Michael tried to deny everything, but when confronted with the evidence, he seemed to give up. Sarah, can't we resolve this through discussion? He pleaded. Seeing Michael's imploring face, I momentarily recalled our past affection, but when I thought of Ethan, my resolve strengthened. It's too late, Michael. This is the path you chose. Eventually, the court granted our divorce with property division decided in my favor. I also received a reasonable amount of alimony. This outcome stirred complex emotions in me. Rather than feeling victorious, I felt a momentary sadness as I realized the end of our 20-year marriage. Meanwhile, Michael's life took a sharp downturn. I heard that when his mistress learned about the significant reduction in his assets, she left him. At work, he was reportedly demoted because of this scandal. Mom, I feel a little sorry for Dad, Ethan murmured one day. His words warmed my heart, reminding me of my son's kindness. I understand, but this is the result of life choices. We need to look forward and move on. Our new life began with an unexpectedly refreshing feeling. We sold the condo and moved to a small house in the suburbs. There's a small vegetable garden in the yard where Ethan and I started growing vegetables together. Mom, this tomato is so sweet and delicious, Ethan exclaimed, biting into a tomato he had harvested. Seeing him like this filled me with genuine happiness. Ethan also successfully navigated his college applications. He was accepted into his first choice, Ohio State University, where he decided to major in environmental science. Mom, I want to contribute to solving environmental problems, he said, his eyes shining with determination. I felt proud seeing his passion. I too began a new challenge. After the divorce, I left the advertising agency and started studying to become a counselor, a long-held dream of mine. Sarah, your experiences will surely help many people, my instructor told me. Her words filled me with a sense of purpose. On the day of Ethan's college matriculation ceremony, I couldn't hold back my tears as I watched him standing on campus. Mom, don't cry. I'll do my best, Ethan said, hugging me. I'm crying because I'm happy, Ethan. I'm so proud of you. On our way home, Ethan spoke quietly in the car. Mom, thank you for everything back then. I don't know what would have happened to me without you. As I drove, I answered slowly. Ethan, I should be thanking you. It's because of you that I was able to be strong. In that moment, we felt a bond that words couldn't express. Epilogue, 5 years have passed. Ethan is now in graduate school, leading environmental protection projects. I've started working at a local counseling center, supporting many people emotionally. The other day, I ran into Michael at the supermarket by chance. He looked tired and older than his years. Sarah, is Ethan doing well? He asked. Yes, very well. He's immersed in environmental research. I see, that's good. As we parted, Michael muttered, Sarah, I'm sorry. Send my regards to Ethan. When I got home and told Ethan about this encounter, he thought for a moment before saying, Mom, we made the right choice, didn't we? Yes, we did. There were tough times, but we've grown stronger, and most importantly, we've remained a family that cherishes each other. Outside the window, a bird was building a nest in the tree we had planted. the beginning of a new life. Our lives too continue to sprout new buds. There will surely be more challenges ahead, but I believe that Ethan and I can weather any storm together. With this belief, we step forward into tomorrow. Story 5. Demolishing my daughter's house after she moved, we heard help during the work. We found in a hidden basement my 3-year-old grandson who had died in an accident a year ago. Sitting in the living room bathed in autumn sunlight, I was leafing through an old photo album. My heart clenched as I gazed at the smiling face of my grandson, Michael. My name is Emily Johnson. Even now, in my 60s, I'm still living quietly in this small town called Maple Grove. A year ago, when 5-year-old Michael passed away in an accident, it felt like all the color drained from my life. My daughter, Sarah, and her husband, John, were plunged into deep sorrow, and since then, I felt like there's been a crack in our family bonds. Last month, I received a call from Sarah. She told me that her husband, John, had been transferred overseas for work. "We want to move forward in a new environment," Sarah said, but there was no strength in her voice. Despite my mixed feelings, I accepted their decision. However, the question of what to do with their house after they left was an issue. In the end, we decided to demolish the old house and clear the land. Letting go of that house filled with memories was painful, but I suppose that's just part of life. As the demolition day approached, my heart grew heavier. On the morning the demolition was set to begin, I woke up early. Unable to eat breakfast, I left the house with an unsettled feeling. As I drove, I remembered how many times I had driven down this road with Michael. When I arrived at Sarah's house, the workers were already gathered. They greeted me politely when they noticed me. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. If there's anything we can help you with today, please don't hesitate to ask," said a man who seemed to be the leader. "Thank you, but I'm fine. I just want to look around inside for a bit," I replied. As I entered the house, a familiar scent hit my nose. Michael's drawings were still taped to the walls. In the kitchen, memories of baking cookies with Sarah came flooding back. In the corner of the living room, the bookshelf John had assembled still stood quietly. As I climbed the stairs and entered Michael's room, tears welled up in my eyes. His toys and clothes were still there, just as if he might return at any moment. On the bed lay the blanket I had knitted for him, neatly folded. Looking out the window, I saw the swing in the garden. I vividly remembered, as if it were yesterday, Michael laughing and shouting higher as he swung. Forgetting the passage of time, I slowly walked through the house. Every room was filled with memories. The happy days we spent in this house, and sometimes painful events were all part of our lives. The sound of engines outside brought me back to reality. The workers must be starting preparations for the demolition. Taking a deep breath, I headed for the front door. As I stepped outside, the workers were looking at me with concern. "Are you all right?" the leader asked. I managed to smile and replied, "Yes, I'm fine. Let's begin." And so, with the sound of heavy machinery, the demolition of the house filled with our family memories began quietly but surely. As the demolition progressed, I stood in the garden watching the work. As the autumn breeze caressed my cheeks, memories of my family flashed through my mind. With each sound of the heavy machinery, I felt a tightening in my chest. Suddenly, the work came to a halt. The leader approached me. "Mrs. Johnson, we'd like to check the basement. Do you have the key?" I tilted my head in confusion. "Basement? This house doesn't have a basement." The leader looked perplexed. "But there's a basement marked on the blueprints." Driven by curiosity, we entered the house. When we removed an old rug in the corner of the living room, there was indeed something that looked like a door. A rusty latch showing no signs of recent use caught my eye. "I had no idea this was here," I murmured. As the workers tried to open the door, we heard a faint sound. We held our breath and listened, and then we heard it again. "Help, somebody help." A weak but clear voice. My heart began to race. The voice sounded like, "Michael," I found myself saying out loud. The workers hurriedly tried to open the door, but years of rust made it difficult to move. While the leader ran to get tools, I pressed my ear against the door. "Michael, is that you?" "It's Grandma." There was no response, but I could hear faint noises. My hands were shaking, and cold sweat beaded on my forehead. When the door finally opened, a damp smell wafted out. The beam of a flashlight illuminated a dark staircase, and we slowly descended. The basement was larger than expected, with a small room at the far end. That door, too, was tightly shut. "Michael, are you in here?" A weak reply came. Grandma. The moment I heard that voice, tears streamed from my eyes. As the workers opened the door, a small figure was visible in the dim corner of the room. The face illuminated by the flashlight was undoubtedly my grandson, Michael. Though emaciated and pale, he was unmistakably alive. Michael! I rushed over and held him tightly. Michael clung to me with his weak arms. Grandma! I was so scared. His trembling voice nearly tore my heart apart. Joy, anger, relief, and anxiety. A flood of emotions washed over me. It's okay now, Grandma's here with you. As I cradled Michael, I steeled my resolve to uncover the truth and protect Michael. That was the only thing I could do now. When I brought Michael above ground, the autumn sunlight illuminated his pale face. I quickly fetched a blanket to wrap around him and asked one of the workers to call an ambulance. It's all right now, Michael. You're safe? I whispered as I held him close. Michael nodded weakly, still trembling in my arms. His body was emaciated, his hair unkempt, and dark circles had formed under his eyes. While waiting for the ambulance to arrive, I also contacted the police. After briefly explaining the situation, they promised to dispatch officers immediately. As the paramedics were performing an initial assessment on Michael, I dialed Sarah's number with shaking hands. After several rings, Sarah's voice came through. Mom? What's wrong? Taking a deep breath, I began to speak. Sarah, listen, we found Michael. I heard Sarah gasp on the other end of the line. What? What did you say? It's Michael. He's alive. We found him in the basement of your house. After a long silence, Sarah broke down in tears. No, that can't be true. It is. The ambulance is here now, and the police. Sarah's sobs intensified, and the call disconnected. A few minutes later, I received a call from John. His voice sounded calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension. Emily, is what we just heard true? Yes, it is. You two need to come back immediately. John heaved a deep sigh and said, I understand. We'll make arrangements right away. Before hanging up, Michael was taken to the hospital by ambulance, and I accompanied him. The examination results showed that fortunately, there were no major health issues, but he was suffering from long-term malnutrition and mild dehydration. As the initial police questioning began, Michael started to speak in a trembling voice. Dad and Mom. They hid me. They said, stay here for a while. I gasped. It was hard to believe what I was hearing. The next day, after Michael's condition had stabilized, a more detailed interview was conducted. I was allowed to be present. Michael began to speak slowly, tears welling up in his eyes. That day, Dad and Mom put me in the car. They said it was a secret adventure, but they took me to the basement of the house. According to his account, Sarah and John had told him to wait here for a while and left him with food and water. At first, they said they would be back in a few days, but as time passed, their visits became less frequent. The police began investigating Sarah and John's financial records, and a shocking fact came to light. The two of them were deeply in debt and struggling to repay it. Furthermore, Michael had a high-value life insurance policy. The police speculated that Sarah and John had planned to fake Michael's accidental death to fraudulently claim the insurance money. Then they likely planned to flee abroad under the guise of an overseas job transfer after receiving the insurance payout. As these facts came to light, anger and sadness swirled within me. I couldn't believe that my own daughter would do something so cruel to her sweet child. Why? Why would they do such a thing? I muttered. The police intensified their investigation, and arrest warrants were issued for Sarah and John. Arrangements were made to apprehend them at the airport upon their arrival. My heart was in turmoil over this series of events. Love for my daughter and anger at her actions, joy at getting my grandson back and heartache over the terror he had experienced. These complex emotions left me sleepless for days. One thing was clear, though. My mission now was to protect Michael and provide him with a safe, loving environment. As Michael was recovering in the hospital, the day of Sarah and John's emergency return approached. My heart was filled with conflicting emotions. The desire to see my daughter battled with anger at her actions. As expected, Sarah and John were taken into custody by the police upon their arrival at the airport. They didn't seem surprised and quietly complied. A few days later, after police interrogations, I was permitted to meet with Sarah and John. In a hospital room, I spent a long time preparing myself emotionally. The door opened, and the two of them entered. Sarah's eyes were red as if she had been crying, and John looked exhausted. Mom, Sarah called out in a small voice. I stared back at her. Why? This single word was all I could force out of my mouth. Sarah broke down crying and collapsed to the floor. John placed a hand on her shoulder, but he was trembling too. We're so sorry, truly sorry. John repeatedly apologized. Unable to contain my emotions, I raised my voice. Sorry. You put your son, my grandson, through such an ordeal, and you think sorry is enough? Sarah raised her face and began to speak through her tears. We were hounded by debt. We lost our minds. We thought Michael's insurance money would solve everything. For money? You sacrificed your own child. My voice shook with anger. John cut in. At first, we really meant it to be just for a few days, but once we told the lie, we couldn't turn back. I let out a deep sigh. Do you have any idea how much fear and pain you've caused Michael? At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and a nurse brought Michael in. The atmosphere in the room instantly froze. When Michael saw his parents, his body stiffened. Sarah and John tried to approach their son, but Michael hid behind me. Michael, I'm so sorry, Sarah said, crying. Michael remained silent, clinging to me. Feeling his small body tremble, I embraced him protectively. John knelt down, lowering himself to Michael's eye level. Son, Dad and Mom made a terrible mistake. We're so sorry for hurting you. Michael finally looked up and said in a shaky voice, Don't leave me again. At those words, everyone in the room broke into tears. Sarah and John bowed deeply, acknowledging their crime and stating they were prepared to accept any punishment. At this moment, while the bonds weren't completely repaired, it felt like a small step towards healing had been taken. Sarah and John's trial shocked the local community. They were charged with child abuse and insurance fraud and ultimately received prison sentences. During the trial, the details of their plan were revealed. We intended to rescue Michael before the house was demolished, Sarah testified tearfully on the stand. But we had to leave the country earlier than planned to escape from debt collectors. John added, We thought no one knew about the basement. We planned to come back before the demolition. But their words left the courtroom silent. The foolishness of their plan and their sense of regret were painfully clear. After the sentencing, I applied for custody of Michael. The court quickly approved, and Michael was officially placed under my care. As our new life began, Michael slowly started to regain his smile. With the support of a psychotherapist, he's facing and trying to overcome his past trauma. One evening, while having a barbecue in the backyard with Michael, he suddenly hugged me. Grandma, thank you, he whispered. I hugged him back tightly. Michael, having you here makes Grandma so happy. At that moment, tears welled up in both our eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, but of new hope and joy. Sarah and John are participating in rehabilitation programs in prison, deeply reflecting on their actions. During visits, they repeatedly offered heartfelt apologies to Michael. While Michael isn't able to fully forgive them yet, he's slowly beginning to show the courage to face his parents. Our family was hurt and nearly broken, but through this experience, we learned the true importance of family bonds. Now we're healing our wounds and exploring a new form of family. Epilogue. 5 years later, Michael has grown into a bright 10-year-old boy. Sarah and John have been released on parole and are working towards reintegrating into society. We regularly attend family counseling, slowly rebuilding our bonds. The house that was supposed to be demolished has now been reborn as a community shelter. It serves a new purpose as a place to support children in difficult situations. Michael sometimes volunteers at the shelter. His kindness and strength give hope to many people. Our story began in despair, but now it has become a story of hope and rebirth. Life may present unexpected challenges, but I believe that with love and courage, any situation can be overcome.